My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 26 years old. 6 hours ago, I ended a 14-month relationship in an Instagram comment section, and the strangest part is how calm my hands still are. They should be shaking. They should be useless. I should be on my bathroom floor crying into a towel or pacing holes into my apartment carpet. But instead, I'm sitting cross-legged on my couch with my phone face down beside me, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator and trying to understand how humiliation can feel so clean once it finally cuts all the way through. I used to think betrayal would sound bigger. I thought it would come with shouting, a slammed door, a confession cracked open in the middle of the night, something obvious, something dramatic enough that later, when people asked what happened, I could point to one ugly moment and say, there, that was it. But it didn't happen like that. It happened through a filtered photo and a caption written by a man who had spent the last year slowly teaching me to laugh at my own disrespect. His name is Landon Hayes. We met at a Super Bowl party last January through mutual friends. He walked in late carrying expensive beer nobody had asked him to bring, smiling like he had never once doubted whether a room would like him. He was handsome in that polished, effortless way that made people shift toward him without noticing they were doing it. Clean shoes, easy confidence, the kind of face that looked even better when he was aware of a camera. I noticed him because everyone else did. He noticed me because later that night, I was the only person in the kitchen who knew how to reset the Wi-Fi after the TV glitched during halftime. Of course you know how to fix it, he said, leaning against the counter with a grin. You seem like the dependable type. At the time, it sounded like a compliment. I work IT support for a healthcare company. It is not glamorous, but it is stable. The hours are predictable, the pay is good enough, and I like solving problems people pretend are impossible until someone patient sits down and actually looks at them. I make around $72,000 a year. I drive a Honda Civic that has never betrayed me. I wear jeans, sneakers, soft black t-shirts, and clothes that do not beg strangers for approval. Landon worked in marketing. He had around 12,000 followers on Instagram, which he treated with the seriousness of a second profession. Everything had a strategy: captions, engagement, timing, angles, brand fit. Even his candid moments were curated so aggressively they barely qualified as accidents. In the beginning, I found it more amusing than alarming. He would tilt his head when he looked at me, like he was studying a piece of furniture he could improve with minor adjustments. You'd be dangerous with a better jacket, he told me on our third date. Dangerous sounds like paperwork, I said. He laughed, touched my wrist, and kissed me in the parking lot like I had passed some private test. So I let it go. Then came the smaller things, the ones that are easy to forgive because each one, on its own, sounds harmless when repeated out loud. He'd asked me to send him photos from our weekends together, then only post the ones where he looked sharp and I looked accidental. If my eyes were half closed, if my mouth was caught mid-word, if the light flattened my face, he would still choose that one because, as he put it, I just look insane in this shot. He joked about my apartment. It's cute, he said once, standing in my living room and turning slowly. Very grad student with benefits. I laughed because he did. He joked about my car. Natalie, I swear this Civic has the emotional energy of a printer. I laughed again. He joked about my job. So what did you do today? He asked one night, stirring pasta in my kitchen. Babysit another doctor who forgot her password? His tone stayed light. His eyes stayed affectionate enough to confuse me. That was the trick of it. Nothing he said came wrapped in outright cruelty. It came decorated as wit, and every time I flinched, he made me feel old-fashioned for feeling it. Sometimes his friends were around when he did it. That made it worse. There is a specific kind of loneliness in smiling, while other people laugh at a version of you that the person beside you keeps inventing. 3 months ago, he asked whether I would ever consider getting a personal trainer. We were in bed, rain tapping the windows, my head on his chest, one of those ordinary, soft moments when your guard is lowest because the room feels safe. For what? I asked. He shrugged. There's an event coming up for work, big crowd, a lot of polished people. I just want us to match. I lifted my head. Match what? Energy, he said quickly. Look, don't make it weird. I just mean we'd be photographed a lot. Us. Not me. Us. That was how he always did it. He never placed the blade directly in my hands. He made me hold it for both of us. I turned away and said I'd think about it. He got quiet after that. Not apologetic, just mildly annoyed, like I had chosen inconvenience over improvement. I only want us to look good together, he said. I remember staring into the dark and feeling something inside me pull tight. Still, I stayed. 2 weeks ago, Landon invited me to his company's summer event. I bought a new button-down shirt, the nicest one I owned, and a pair of khakis that fit me so well I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual before leaving. I even changed shoes at the last minute because I could hear his voice in my head telling me sneakers would ruin the line of the outfit. At the party, the lights were gold and flattering. Rooftop bar, glass walls, music just loud enough to force people closer when they talked. Landon looked exactly like he belonged there. I tried. I really did. But every time he introduced me, something felt off. "This is Natalie," he'd say. Or, "This is my friend Natalie." Friend. The first time I told myself maybe I misheard him. The second time I felt heat crawl up my neck. The third time I stood smiling beside him while a woman in a satin green dress asked how long we had known each other, and Landon answered, "A while," before steering the conversation toward himself. On the drive home, I finally asked him about it. His eyes stayed on the road. "You're being sensitive. We've been together for over a year. It was a work event." So? So I don't like defining my personal life in professional settings. I turned toward the window because I knew if I looked at him any longer, I would either cry or say something sharp enough to force the whole truth out before I was ready to hear it. That brings me to this afternoon. I was lying on my couch, half scrolling, half dozing, when I saw his face first. Then mine. It was a photo from last weekend at a friend's birthday. We were standing shoulder to shoulder in late sunlight, both smiling, his arm around my waist. I remember that exact moment. I remember feeling happy in it. The caption underneath read, "When you realize you're dating down." Below that, a rising chart emoji. Then, #honest moment, #settlement sucks. For a second, my brain refused to process it. I thought maybe it was a joke aimed somewhere else, some trend I didn't understand. Then I opened the comments. His friends were already there, laughing emojis. "Landon, stop! You're too pretty for this." Finally said it. "You need someone on your level." Someone I didn't know wrote, "Know your worth." I stared at the screen so long my thumb went numb. What hurt most was not the insult. Not exactly. It was the fact that the photo he chose was tender. Real. One of the few pictures of us where I had looked at it later and thought, maybe this is how love appears from the outside. Maybe this is proof we were better than I feared. And he turned that moment into a public joke about settling. Thousands of people, co-workers, friends of friends, strangers, everyone invited to laugh while I sat in my own apartment and read what he had apparently believed long enough to type carefully. I could have called him. I could have texted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I could have gone to his place and demanded the kind of private explanation decent people offer before they destroy something. But private dignity had not been given to me. He had chosen an audience, so I gave him one. I liked the post first. Petty, maybe, but I wanted him to see my name appear beneath it before he saw anything else. I wanted one cold second where he realized I had read every word. Then I commented, "You're free to date up now. Wishing you the life you think you deserve." My phone started vibrating almost immediately. Replies. Likes. Notifications stacking so fast the screen kept refreshing. His followers were confused. Some thought we were joking, some didn't. One of his friends commented, "Wait, what?" with 4 question marks and a panicked emoji. I ignored all of it. Instead, I opened my own account and posted a solo photo from last month. Nothing dramatic, just me in evening light on my friend's balcony, smiling at something outside the frame. Caption, single, apparently available for an upgrade. Then I tagged him. After that, the internet did what it always does when people hand it blood in an attractive format. His followers came to my page. My friends went to his. People started taking screenshots. A dating account with a smug little logo followed me. DM requests poured in from strangers asking if I was okay, if this was real, if they could repost it. Then the whole thing shifted. A new comment appeared under his original post from Sabrina Cole. I knew the name. His ex-girlfriend. The one he used to mention with that careful casualness people use when someone still lives in the room with them even after they are gone. Successful. Beautiful. Hard to forget. The woman I had learned not to ask about because his answers always made me feel like I had interrupted an unfinished sentence. Her comment was short. Dating down? Interesting. Especially after you asked for another chance 6 months into this relationship. I still have the messages. Maybe sit this one out. I actually stopped breathing. Everything went wild after that. The replies multiplied. People started tagging each other. His friends disappeared from the comment section. The laughter changed shape. It was no longer pointed at me. Within 20 minutes, the original post was gone. Deleted. But too late is still too late, and screenshots move faster than regret. At 8:03 p.m., Landon finally texted me. "Why would you do that to me?" I read it once, then again, amazed by the audacity packed into 7 words. I typed back, "Do what? Respond to the post you made about me in front of 12,000 people?" 3 dots appeared immediately. It was a joke. You weren't supposed to take it that far. I laughed out loud then, alone in my apartment, the sound brittle enough to scare me. "You called me someone you were settling for, publicly. How exactly was I supposed to take it?" He answered, "You humiliated me." My fingers moved before I could second guess them. "No, Landon, you humiliated me. It just came back wearing your face." He never responded to that. About an hour later, his mother called. I let it ring until the screen went dark. Then his older sister texted me, accusing me of being cruel, vindictive, dramatic. I did not answer her either. There are moments when defending yourself only feeds the version of you other people need in order to protect the person who hurt you. So now I'm here. My phone is on silent. The room is dim except for the stove light in the kitchen. Somewhere out there, screenshots of my relationship are still moving from one screen to another, and strangers are deciding who the villain is. Part of me feels satisfied. I won't lie about that. He publicly cut me down, and the lie he built himself on cracked open almost instantly. Part of me feels stupid for staying so long, and part of me, maybe the deepest part, is just relieved. Relieved because once someone calls you a downgrade in front of the world, the confusion dies. All the little jokes line up. The comments about my car, my job, my clothes, my body, my energy, my not quite enoughness, they stop looking random. They become what they always were. Contempt. Maybe the worst thing Landon ever did was not posting that caption. Maybe it was teaching me, little by little, to doubt my right to be hurt by him at all. That part is over now. And if Sabrina Cole is telling the truth, if he was chasing his ex-girlfriend while sleeping beside me, then this is not even the ugliest part of the story. Not yet. 3 days later, the story still hadn't died. If anything, it had spread the way fire spreads when people keep pretending they're only watching. By Sunday night, screenshots of the exchange had escaped the original circle of people who actually knew us and drifted into that wider, stranger world made up of mutuals, old classmates, coworkers, friends, people who treat someone else's humiliation like episodic content. I had at least 15 messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Is this really you? Girl, I just saw this on a dating account. You okay? He really posted that?" One account with a smug caption about public breakups had reposted the screenshots and written something like, "She matched his energy and won." It pulled tens of thousands of likes in a day. My follower count jumped by hundreds, even though my page is painfully boring. A plant by the window. A sunset over a grocery store parking lot. My friend Tessa's dog in a sweater. Nothing in my life had prepared me for strangers applauding the collapse of my self-respect like it was entertainment. Landon, from what I could see before he went private again, was not handling the attention well. He locked his account Saturday morning, made it public again by afternoon, then private by evening. That alone told me more than any statement could have. People only toggle visibility like that when they still believe they can control how a mess looks, if they just find the right angle. Tessa came over Sunday with Thai takeout and the kind of silence that only old friends know how to bring into a room without making it heavier. She sat cross-legged on my floor, chopsticks in hand, reading through the screenshots people had sent me. "He really thought dating down was going to make him look good?" she asked. "I don't think he thought beyond the first 10 seconds, I said. "No," she glanced up at me. "I think he did. That's the problem." That landed harder than I wanted it to, because part of me, an embarrassingly stubborn, grieving part, had still been trying to file what happened under impulse, a bad joke, a cruel moment, a choice made in vanity and stupidity, something ugly, yes, but shallow, not deliberate. Tessa knew me too well to let me hide in that illusion. "He's been setting this up for months," she said quietly. "Not the post itself, maybe, but the dynamic, making little cuts, seeing if you'd stay, seeing how much you'd absorb without calling it what it was." I looked down at my food and didn't answer, because I knew she was right. Monday morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I usually do, but something about the timing made me pick up. "Hello?" There was a pause, then a woman's voice. Smooth. Controlled. Not nervous, which somehow made me nervous for her. "Hi, Natalie?" "Yes." This is Sabrina. I went still. Not because I didn't know who she meant, because I did. There are names that enter your relationship long before the person does, names you learn to hear without reacting. Names attached to stories told too casually. She was that name. Landon's ex-girlfriend. The woman from the comment. I stood up without realizing it and walked to the kitchen, as if the extra 10 feet would give me better balance. Okay, I said carefully. I know this is strange, she said, and I know you don't owe me a conversation, but after what happened online, I thought you deserve context. The word deserved made my throat tighten, because context is what people withhold when they are busy benefiting from your ignorance. I leaned against the counter. What kind of context? A soft exhale came through the phone, like she had rehearsed this and still hated it, the kind that probably should have reached you a long time ago. I didn't interrupt her after that. Maybe I should have. Maybe a wiser woman would have hung up, protected herself, refused to let the ex-girlfriend of the man who had just publicly degraded her narrate anything. But instinct is a strange thing. Mine told me she wasn't calling to compete with me. She was calling because she was tired. And tired people tell the truth differently. According to Sabrina, Landon had been reaching out to her on and off throughout almost our entire relationship. Not every week, not obsessively, just often enough to prove she had never fully left his mind. It started small. A message after seeing a restaurant that reminded him of a trip they once took. A reaction to an old song. A casual, "Hope you're doing well." A photo of a dog that looked like one they had once laughed at together. Breadcrumbs. Nothing you could easily weaponize. Nothing dramatic enough to force a confrontation. Just the kind of contact people justify when they want to keep an old door unlocked. At first, I ignored most of it, Sabrina said. I'm in a relationship. I'd moved on. I wasn't interested in reopening anything. I closed my eyes. Moved on. The phrase sat inside me like a mirror tilted at the wrong angle. Because I suddenly understood, with sickening clarity, that Landon had been in our relationship with one hand still reaching backward. Then 6 months in, she continued, he sent something longer. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. She did not paraphrase immediately. She let the silence settle like she knew exactly how much air I needed before the next blow. He said he thought he'd made a mistake, she said at last. He said what we had was never fully resolved in his head. I didn't speak. He said you were good to him, Sabrina went on, quieter now. Stable, kind, easy to be with. But he also said he felt like something was missing, that he was trying to want the life that made sense. My stomach dropped, trying to want the life that made sense. There it was, the polished version of contempt, the prettier cousin of settling. The exact kind of sentence a man like Landon would write because it sounds tortured instead of selfish. Sabrina kept talking, and every word stripped something away. He had asked whether there was any chance they could meet and talk. He had asked whether she ever thought about trying again. He had admitted he still compared other relationships to theirs. And then, she said, when I didn't respond the way he wanted, he backtracked. Of course he did, I said before I could stop myself. There was the faintest trace of bitterness in her voice when she answered. Yes, of course he did. She told him to focus on the woman he was with, told him that if he had chosen to build something else, then he needed to act accordingly, told him not to use nostalgia as a weapon against someone who hadn't done anything wrong. He replied that she was right, that he was being stupid, that he just needed to clear his head. Then, for a while, he went quiet, until 2 weeks before the Instagram post. That was when he messaged her again. This time shorter, more careless, asking whether she was still with her boyfriend, saying he had been rethinking a lot lately. He left himself just enough room to pretend innocence, Sabrina said. But Natalie, I'm not stupid. Neither was I. Not anymore. I turned and looked out the window above my sink. It faced the alley behind my building, where somebody had left an old wooden chair beside the dumpster weeks ago and never bothered to claim it. The rain had swollen the legs. The seat had started splitting down the middle. I stared at it while I asked the question that mattered most. Why comment publicly? Sabrina was quiet for a beat. Because he counted on silence, she said, and because once I saw the post, I understood what he was doing. I said nothing. I think it was bait, she continued. I think he knew I still followed him. I think humiliating you publicly was supposed to do 2 things at once. Make him look desirable again, and signal that he was unhappy enough to be available. My hand went cold. Available, like I had not been sharing a bed with him, like the weekends at my apartment, the dinners, the road trip in April, the Christmas with his mother, the tiny domestic routines I had mistaken for intimacy. All of it could be flattened into background while he staged his dissatisfaction for someone else to notice. So I swallowed. What? A placeholder? Sabrina didn't answer right away, and that hurt more than if she had. Because careful silence is sometimes the kindest form of confirmation. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost whatever distance it started with. "I'm sorry," she said. "Truly, I know this is brutal, but I watched him do the same emotional orbiting to me when we were together, and I wish someone had been blunter with me back then." I pressed my palm to my forehead. The sadness that had been hanging in me since Friday shifted then, not gone, not replaced, just sharpened into something cleaner. Not rage, not even heartbreak exactly. Recognition. All at once, the whole relationship rearranged itself. The teasing, the company party, the vanity, the way he posed us online like a branding exercise instead of a life, the way he always seemed faintly disappointed whenever I behaved like a real person instead of a polished accessory. I had spent 14 months trying to be enough for someone who had already assigned me the role of temporary stability. A safe season, a practical choice, a woman to stand beside while he scanned the room for someone he thought reflected him better. I thanked Sabrina, though the words felt too small for the wound she had just named. Before we hung up, she said one last thing. "He's already telling people you overreacted," she said, "that you turned a joke into a public takedown." I laughed once, no humor in it. "Of course he is. He also told one person," she added, "that you were insecure and difficult in private, and that the relationship had been exhausting for months." There it was. The second betrayal. The one that always comes after the first, when people like Landon realize they can't win on facts. They go for tone. They go for your character. They go for the oldest trick in the book. Make the wounded person look unstable and the person who drew blood look misunderstood. "Thanks for telling me," I said. "I'm not doing this for him," Sabrina said. "I know." After we ended the call, I sat on my kitchen floor. Not because I was falling apart, because I suddenly didn't trust my legs to decide what this information required of them. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for my coffee to go cold on the counter. Long enough for my phone to light up twice with texts I ignored. Long enough to realize that pain changes once its shape becomes visible. It had been one thing to believe my boyfriend humiliated me in public because he was careless and cruel. It was another to understand that the humiliation had likely been part of an audition. That he had not just insulted me, he had tried to reposition himself. By noon, his mother texted, "My son is devastated. I hope you're happy with what you've done." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. There is something almost impressive about the speed with which some families convert consequences into persecution. I wrote back, "What I did." He posted a photo of us and called me someone he was settling for in front of thousands of people. Her reply came fast. He was venting. "People your age do stupid things online. You didn't have to humiliate him back." I actually looked around my empty apartment then, as if there might be witnesses to the absurdity. Venting. It is amazing what cruelty becomes once a parent wants to protect their child from the sound of his own choices echoing back. I typed, "I didn't humiliate him. I responded to being humiliated. There's a difference." She left me on read for 6 minutes, then returned with, "He hasn't been eating. He's crying. This is affecting his job." That should have moved me more than it did. Maybe some part of me was already hardening. Maybe grief only leaves room for so much borrowed guilt before it starts refusing new deliveries. So I wrote, "I'm sorry he's having a hard time, but that's not my responsibility anymore." Her answer came like a slap I had expected since the day I first met her in that too-clean kitchen last Christmas. "I always knew you weren't right for him." My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I sent back the truest thing I had said in days. "I think we finally agree on something." She did not respond after that. Around 3 in the afternoon, Landon's older sister Paige texted me too. Paige had always been polite in a way that never quite turned into warmth. The kind of woman who asks what you do for work and manages to sound disappointed by the answer before you finish the sentence. Her text was exactly what I expected and still somehow managed to sting. "You really didn't have to destroy him publicly like that. Whatever was wrong between you two could have stayed private." I read it twice and set the phone down. Private. The word again. Everybody suddenly loved privacy once the spectacle stopped flattering their side. I didn't answer her. Because some arguments are designed like hallways with no doors. You can walk them for hours and never arrive anywhere except deeper into someone else's refusal to see what happened. By Tuesday morning, I got the message that changed my caution into discipline. It came from a woman named Vanessa, one of Landon's co-workers from the summer event. I remembered her because she had been kind to me that night, in a way no one else really was. She had asked me about my work and actually listened to the answer. Her message was simple. "Hey, you probably don't remember me well, but I wanted to tell you something because I think you should know. Landon's been telling people at work that you were emotionally manipulative and that the Instagram thing was basically him snapping under pressure. I read it standing in line for coffee before work, and for a second, the whole room tilted. Not because I believed it would stick, because I knew he would say it smoothly. Emotionally manipulative. I could practically hear the tone he would use, regretful, tired, earnest. The voice of a man bravely speaking his truth after enduring a difficult relationship. Not too dramatic, just wounded enough to invite belief. Vanessa sent another message before I could answer. I don't know you well, but what he's saying doesn't line up with what I saw. At the summer party, he acted like you barely existed until people noticed you were standing there. That wasn't concern. That was image management. Image management. I saved the screenshot immediately. Then I answered, "Thank you. I appreciate you telling me." She replied, "For what it's worth, a lot of us aren't buying what he's selling." The post didn't look like a cry for help. It looked mean. I stood there with my coffee going untouched in my hand and felt something settle inside me. Not peace. Too early for that. But strategy. Because heartbreak makes you emotional. Humiliation makes you reactive. But slander makes you organized. That afternoon, I started saving everything. Screenshots of his original caption, screenshots of my response, Sabrina's messages, Vanessa's warning, texts from his mother, texts from Paige. I created a folder on my laptop labeled receipts, and the cold practicality of that act almost made me laugh. For 14 months, I had been asked to minimize my instincts, to round off my discomfort, to translate disrespect into misunderstanding. Now I was doing the opposite. I was naming things exactly as they were. By Wednesday evening, Landon texted me for the first time since his pathetic accusation that I had humiliated him. "Can we talk in person? I think we owe each other a real conversation." I looked at the message for a long time. Outside, the light was turning thin and gray over the parking lot. Inside, my apartment felt too quiet again, but not in the fragile way it had over the weekend. In a more watchful way. Like the rooms themselves were waiting to see whether I would return to old habits just because the wound was speaking in a softer voice now. Part of me wanted to ignore him. Part of me wanted to ask whether he meant a real conversation this time or just a better lit lie. And part of me, some raw, exhausted piece of me I don't entirely admire, wanted to look him in the face when he realized I knew everything. Not for revenge, for alignment. For that rare moment when the truth enters a room before either person sits down. So I answered, 1 hour, public place, after work tomorrow. His reply came fast. Thank you. I didn't feel generous reading it. I felt prepared. Because by then, I understood something I hadn't understood when I first saw that post. The Instagram caption was not the beginning of the story. It was just the first time he stopped trying to hide what he believed I was worth. He chose a coffee shop near my office. Of course he did. Not one near his apartment. Not one tucked into some quieter neighborhood where fewer people might recognize him. Somewhere neutral, somewhere public enough to make a scene inconvenient, but polished enough that he could still feel like the man in control of the room if he sat up straight and lowered his voice at the right moments. I got there 7 minutes late on purpose. Not out of cruelty, just because for 14 months I had been the one adjusting my timing around his moods, his preferences, his image, his vague little emergencies. I was done arriving early for people who mistook accommodation for devotion. Landon was already seated by the window when I walked in. For one disorienting second, the familiarity of him hit me before the anger did. The angle of his shoulders. The way he tapped one thumb lightly against the side of his cup when he was anxious. The dark sweater I'd seen draped over my kitchen chair more than once. It is embarrassing how quickly the body remembers tenderness, even after the mind has started building a case against it. Then he looked up, and whatever softness the memory tried to drag out of me hardened again. He looked bad. Not tragic, not ruined, just frayed around the edges in a way I doubted he had much experience hiding. His eyes were bloodshot. His jaw was rough with a day too much stubble. He gave me a tight, uncertain smile, and I understood immediately that this meeting mattered to him for reasons that had very little to do with me. Damage control always looks wounded when it wants back inside. I walked over, set my bag down, and stayed standing for half a beat longer than necessary. "Hi," he said. "Hi." I sat. A server appeared almost instantly, as if the room itself could sense the tension and wanted to offer a distraction. I ordered an iced coffee I didn't really want. Landon already had something hot in front of him that had gone mostly untouched. When we were alone again, he inhaled slowly, like someone preparing to lift something heavier than he expected. "Thank you for coming." I looked at him. What did you want to say? That threw him a little. He blinked once, almost imperceptibly. Men like Landon count on atmosphere. They count on a pause long enough to turn accountability into emotional complexity. They count on women doing half the emotional labor by making things gentler than they are. I gave him no atmosphere. He folded his hands together on the table. I wanted to apologize, he said. What I posted was wrong. I nodded once. Yes, it was. He waited. When I didn't fill the silence, his expression shifted. Not anger, not yet. Confusion, maybe. He had expected the beginning of a conversation. What I had given him sounded more like a verdict. That's it? He asked. Just yes? I held his gaze. What response were you hoping for? His fingers tightened slightly around the paper cup. I don't know. Something more human than this, maybe? The irony was so sharp I nearly smiled. More human, I repeated. You posted a smiling photo of us and captioned it like I was a clearance item you regretted buying. He flinched. It was a joke. No, I said quietly. It was contempt with a filter on it. He looked away then, toward the window, where people were passing on the sidewalk without any idea that a year and 2 months of my life was being autopsied over badly steamed milk. I know it looked awful, he said. I'm not denying that. I wasn't thinking clearly. That line might have worked on me a week earlier, maybe even 3 days earlier. But Sabrina had called. Vanessa had called. And beneath both conversations was the same ugly pattern. Landon thinking very clearly when it served him, then claiming emotional fog when consequences arrived. So help me understand, I said. What part was unclear? The caption, the hashtags, or the timing? His mouth tightened. I was upset. With me? With everything. Interesting, I said, because your post was pretty specific. He exhaled through his nose, already frustrated that this was not becoming the soft, sad reconciliation scene he had written in his head. Natalie, I'm trying here. No, I said, you're managing. His eyes snapped back to mine. That landed. Good. The server brought my drink. I thanked her, waited until she stepped away, then wrapped my hand around the cup without taking a sip. Landon leaned forward a little. I made a mistake, he said. A huge one, I know that. But I came here because I wanted to talk about whether we can move past it. There it was. Not apology, not clarity, not even honesty. Possibility. He still wanted possibility. I stared at him for a moment so long that color began creeping up his neck. Move past what exactly? I asked. The post? The public humiliation? Or the part where you spent our relationship texting Sabrina and asking whether she'd take you back? Everything in his face stopped. It was one of the strangest things I have ever watched happen to another person. That instant where a body betrays the truth before words can scramble after it. His shoulders went rigid. His mouth parted slightly. One hand slipped from the cup and dropped to his lap like he no longer trusted it to perform normally. Who told you that? He asked. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because guilt is so boring when it is surprised. Does it matter? His eyes narrowed. It does if she's twisting things. I tilted my head. Is she? He looked down, then back up again, recalculating in real time. That was one conversation, he said. One. And it didn't mean what it probably sounds like. I felt something inside me cool to a nearly dangerous stillness. One conversation, I repeated. That's your defense? I was confused. For 14 months? That's not what I said. No, I said. You just implied it in installments. He pressed a hand to his forehead. This is exactly why I wanted to talk in person. Context matters. Go ahead then, I said. Give me the context where telling your ex-girlfriend you made a mistake and were trying to want the stable life doesn't mean exactly what it sounds like. The blood drained from his face so fast it almost looked theatrical. She told you that? She told me enough. He swallowed. For a second, I thought he might actually tell the truth. There was a tiny crack in him then, something exhausted and cornered and almost honest. But Landon had spent too long surviving on image to surrender to reality without one last attempt to style it. She's bitter, he said. She always did this. Take one emotional moment and blow it up into a bigger statement about who I am. I let the silence answer for me. Because the problem with lying after the truth is already in the room is that the lie sounds lonely. He shifted in his seat. She knew I was vulnerable, he continued. We had history. I reached out when I was in a bad place. That doesn't mean I didn't love you. There it was again. Love. People use that word like it should erase evidence. I finally took a sip of the coffee. It tasted watery and too sweet. You don't get to use love as a fog machine, I said. His brows drew together. What? You don't get to say you love me like that solves the rest of it. Natalie. No, listen to me. Something in my tone made him stop. I set the cup down carefully. You don't post someone publicly and call it a joke. You don't spend months making little comments about her car, her apartment, her body, her energy, then act shocked when she decides those comments meant something. You don't introduce her as your friend at a work event after a year together. And you definitely do not message your ex-girlfriend halfway through the relationship to say you made a mistake, then sit here and tell me you were just confused. His throat worked once. The old version of me would have softened by then. The old version of me would have noticed his discomfort and unconsciously started making room for it. That version is the reason women like me stay too long with men like him. We are trained to interpret their shame as fragility instead of information. So I kept going. You know what the worst part is? I asked. He didn't answer. The worst part isn't even the post. His eyes flickered. It's that I can see now how long you've been rehearsing the idea that I was beneath you. You dressed it up as teasing, style, self-improvement, chemistry, brand fit, whatever word made you feel less ugly while saying ugly things. But the message was always the same. I was good enough to keep around, not good enough to respect. His lips parted, then closed again. That was the first moment he looked truly small. Not because I had raised my voice, not because I had humiliated him, because I had described him accurately. He stared at the table. I didn't mean for it to become this, he said at last, and his voice was thinner now, less controlled. I leaned back. That sentence is doing a lot of work. He looked up, eyes bright, in a way that would once have broken something open in me. I'm serious, he said. I didn't think... I know, I cut in. That's exactly the problem. You didn't think about me as a person in that moment. You thought about attention, about optics, about how the caption would play, about whether somebody specific might see it. He went completely still again. Sabrina had been right. I watched the understanding move across his face, the realization that I knew not just what he had done, but why. His voice dropped. She told you that too? She didn't have to. I know what bait looks like. He rubbed both hands over his face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. A chair scraped across the floor somewhere near the door. Outside, a woman in a red coat hurried past with her umbrella tilted low against the wind. Ordinary life kept moving around us while mine sat there in pieces. Then Landon started crying. Not loudly, not theatrically, no choking sobs, just sudden tears he clearly had not planned for, slipping down faster than he could wipe them away without making it obvious. A year ago, I would have moved immediately. Reached for napkins, touched his wrist, softened my voice, felt guilty for my own anger because it had made someone else vulnerable. Instead, I sat still. I'm not proud of how cold that sounds. I'm also not ashamed of it, because what I felt looking at him then was not cruelty. It was distance. He shook his head once, eyes wet, embarrassed. I messed this up, he said. Yes, I was scared. Of what? He laughed once under his breath, broken and bitter. You really want me to answer that? I held his gaze. Try. He looked at me for a long second. Then, finally, something honest cracked through. You were safe, he said. The words hit harder than the lies. He saw it instantly, too, because his whole face changed. He knew he had said too much, but he couldn't take it back. Safe. Not loved, not chosen, not cherished. Safe. A harbor, a fallback, a place to stand while he kept searching the horizon for a prettier storm. I nodded once. That's exactly what I thought. He shook his head quickly. No, that's not all I meant. I know, that's what makes it worse. He reached for the cup, realized his hand was shaking, and pulled it back again. I cared about you. You cared about what I made possible, I said. That's not true. It is true. I made your life steadier, easier, cleaner. I made you feel admired when you needed admiration and forgiven when you needed forgiveness. I made you feel grounded while you still kept one foot pointed toward the door. That is not the same as loving me. His face folded in on itself then. There is no elegant way to describe what happens when a person realizes the version of themselves they have been defending is gone. Not shattered exactly, just stripped, reduced to action, consequence, pattern. He looked young suddenly, not in a flattering way, in a way that made his vanity look pathetic. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. And there it was. Not, I'm sorry. Not, you didn't deserve this. Not even I understand why you're done. How do I fix this? As if the tragedy here was a system malfunction and not a moral one. You don't, I said. He stared at me. I stood up. His panic surfaced immediately. Wait, Natalie. I pulled my wallet from my bag, set enough cash on the table for both drinks, and slung the strap over my shoulder. We still have each other's things, he said quickly, as if logistics might create one more thread between us. Can we at least handle that like adults? I looked down at him. That's the first sensible thing you've said today. He winced. I'll text you, I said. Then I walked out. He didn't follow me. Maybe because he knew better. Maybe because public spaces only protect people who still care how they look in them. Maybe because he had finally realized that the version of me who would turn around if he said my name the right way did not exist anymore. The cold outside hit my face so sharply it almost felt medicinal. I stood on the sidewalk for a minute just breathing. There was no triumph in it. That is the part people misunderstand about finally seeing someone clearly. Clarity is not joy. It is not revenge. It is not cinematic closure with music swelling under the final line. It is quieter than that. Just a woman standing in the wind, understanding too late that what she mistook for intimacy had often been utility, and that the grief she feels now is not only for the relationship, but for the version of herself who spent so much energy trying to earn tenderness from someone who had confused admiration with love. I went back to work, answered emails, joined a meeting, pretended to care about a printer migration issue, then came home to an apartment that felt both emptier and more loyal than it had in months. By evening, Landon had posted again. Not directly about me, of course. He was too smart to be explicit now. It was an Instagram story. Black background, white text. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. No name, no details, just enough ambiguity to look profound and enough timing to function as accusation. Within an hour, the supporting cast reappeared. One of his friends posted about people who punish vulnerability. Another shared something vague about women who weaponize public sympathy. Paige reposted a quote about toxic exes with a broken heart emoji that would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. I did not respond. That, more than anything, seemed to enrage them. Because people who rely on performance always struggle when their audience refuses to keep acting. Instead, I texted him about our things. Leave mine in a bag outside your door tomorrow after 7. I'll do the same. He answered, fine. Then, 2 minutes later, I really am sorry. I looked at the message, felt absolutely nothing useful, and locked my phone. The exchange happened the next evening without incident. My books, a charger, a denim jacket, an old sleep shirt that somehow ended up at his place. His things from mine, toothbrush, face wash, a gym hoodie, the expensive hair product he once joked cost more than my monthly electric bill. I left the bag outside my door and went inside before he arrived. Through the peephole, I watched him bend, set mine down, pick his up, and hesitate for half a second like he thought the door might still open. It didn't. That should have been the end of it. But Thursday morning, Vanessa messaged again. This time there was no preamble. HR got involved. I sat up straighter in bed, suddenly wide awake. What happened? I typed back. The typing bubble appeared, vanished, reappeared. Apparently, he's been spending a lot of company time trying to manage the fallout. On his phone constantly, missing deadlines, telling people his personal situation is affecting his mental state. A manager asked what was going on, and he started talking about the post and how he was being harassed online. I stared at the screen. Another message came. They reviewed the public posts. He showed them selectively, but other people had screenshots. HR basically told him this was a personal matter he initiated and that bringing it into work was inappropriate. He's not fired or anything, but they're monitoring things now. He's furious. I read that twice. Then a third message arrived. For what it's worth, most people here are tired of it. Sympathy is hard to maintain when someone keeps manufacturing their own disaster. I set the phone down on my comforter and looked across the room at the soft gray light spreading over my dresser. For the first time since Friday, I felt something close to exhale. Not because his life was getting worse, not because consequences are satisfying in some clean, moral way, but because reality had finally entered a room he could not curate. No angle, no caption, no carefully chosen audience, just pattern meeting consequence. And somewhere beneath that, quiet but unmistakable, was the feeling I had not let myself name yet. He was losing control of the version of the story where I was the problem. Which meant sooner or later, one of two things would happen. He would finally tell the truth, or someone else would do it for him. The week after the coffee shop felt quieter. Not peaceful, just quieter in the way a storm feels after it's done, tearing through everything that was loose enough to move. The noise fades, but the damage is still there, visible, inconvenient, impossible to ignore once you actually look at it. Landon's Instagram went private again. This time it stayed that way. The vague posts stopped. His friends got bored. The accounts that had reposted our situation moved on to a new breakup, a new scandal, a new couple willing to bleed in public for strangers' attention. 15 minutes of internet relevance. That's all it ever is. But the real consequences don't leave when the audience does. Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, just steady. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I considered ignoring it, letting it pass. But something in the rhythm of it, patient, almost tired, made me walk over and open the door. Landon's mother was standing there. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. Like the version of her I'd met before, the polished woman with firm opinions and subtle disapproval, had been worn down by something she couldn't quite control. "Hello, Natalie," she said. "Hi." We stood there for a moment, the hallway light flickering slightly above her head. "May I come in?" she asked. I hesitated. Every instinct I had told me this conversation was unnecessary, that nothing useful would come from it, that I had already explained more than enough to the people who had decided early and firmly that I was the problem. But there was something in her face. Not authority, not judgment, just exhaustion. So I stepped aside. 5 minutes, I said. She nodded and walked in. She sat on my couch like she had been there before, which she had, hands folded too tightly in her lap, eyes scanning the room as if looking for something that would explain how everything had unraveled so quickly. "I know my son isn't perfect," she began. I leaned against the wall across from her. "That's a good place to start." She flinched slightly, but kept going. "He made a mistake with that post. I'm not here to defend that." I said nothing. "But you have to understand," she continued. "He's always been insecure. He relies on validation more than he should. Social media, attention, it gets to him. He didn't mean to hurt you." There it was again. Didn't mean to. I crossed my arms. "Intent doesn't erase impact." She sighed. "I know, I do. But 14 months is a long time to throw away over one moment." I shook my head slowly. It wasn't one moment. She looked up at me then, really looked, like she was trying to decide whether I believed that or just needed to. "It was 14 months of small things," I said. "The comments, the jokes, the way he introduced me like I didn't matter, the way he talked to other people about me, the way he made me feel like I was always just slightly not enough." Her mouth tightened. "He didn't realize he was doing that." I almost laughed. "That doesn't make it better." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I let the silence sit there, because sometimes people need to hear their own excuses echo back at them before they understand how empty they sound. "He was confused," she tried again. "He didn't know what he wanted." I pushed off the wall. "He knew enough to message his ex-girlfriend and tell her he made a mistake." That landed. Hard. Her posture shifted immediately. Shoulders stiffening, eyes narrowing slightly. Not in anger, but in recognition of something she had not been told. "He said that?" she asked. I held her gaze. "Yes." She looked down at her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because this was the part no parent wants to face. The version of their child that exists outside the family narrative. The one shaped by choices they didn't witness, patterns they didn't correct, consequences they can't soften. "I didn't know," she said quietly. I figured. She sat there for a long second, absorbing it. Then she tried one last time. "He's talking about leaving," she said, "moving back home. He says he can't face people here anymore." I shrugged. "That's his decision. He's devastated." I met her eyes. So was I. That ended it. Not dramatically. Not with raised voices or final speeches. Just 2 sentences that didn't fit together anymore. She nodded slowly, stood up, and walked toward the door. Before she left, she paused. "I did like you," she said, almost as an afterthought. I believed her. That was the strange part. "I liked you too," I said. Then she left. After that, things settled. Not perfectly. Just into place. The noise faded completely. No more posts. No more messages from strangers. No more friends of friends inserting themselves into something they didn't understand. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Landon had put in his notice at work. Officially, he was taking time to focus on himself. Unofficially, the combination of HR watching him, coworkers losing patience, and his carefully managed image cracking in too many places at once had made staying impossible. He moved back to his hometown 3 hours away. A reset. A retreat. A rebrand. I didn't know which one he believed it was. And for the first time since all of this started, I realized I didn't care. A few days later, I got a message from Paige, his sister, the same one who had called me cruel, the same one who had posted about toxic exes like she was curating a narrative she hadn't bothered to verify. Her message was short. "I owe you an apology. I didn't know everything. I believed what he told me. That wasn't fair to you." I read it twice. Then I typed back. "I appreciate you saying that." A minute later, she replied, For what it's worth, I think he's finally being forced to look at himself honestly. Whether that leads to change, I don't know. But this needed to happen. I stared at that message longer than I expected to, because it was the first time someone from his side had acknowledged reality without trying to reshape it. I hope he figures it out, I wrote, and I meant it, just not in a way that included me anymore. The last message came late, 2:07 a.m. I was half asleep when my phone lit up beside me, the screen casting that familiar pale glow across the ceiling. His name. For a second, I considered ignoring it, letting it sit there unread, letting whatever version of closure he was trying to send exist without an audience. But curiosity is stubborn, so I opened it. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to say this before I leave. I sat up slowly. I'm sorry, not in a way that expects anything from you. I just see it now. You didn't deserve any of it. You were always good to me. I just didn't know how to value something that wasn't chaotic. I thought I needed more, and I ended up destroying something that was actually real. I swallowed, kept reading. I don't expect a response. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, even if it's too late. I read it again, then a third time. There were no excuses in it. No blame, no redirection, no attempt to pull me back into a conversation I had already finished. Just recognition. Late, but real. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. There are moments like that. Quiet, unobserved, almost invisible, where you decide what kind of ending you want. Not for the relationship, for yourself. I could have responded, could have said thank you, could have acknowledged the apology, could have offered some version of forgiveness that would make both of us feel like the story had closed neatly. But closure doesn't come from symmetry. It comes from knowing you don't need the other person to agree with your version of what happened in order for it to be true. So I locked my phone, and I let the message sit there unanswered, not out of anger, out of completion. The practical things came next. We untangled the last shared accounts, canceled what needed canceling, moved photos into an archive folder instead of deleting them entirely. 14 months doesn't disappear just because it ends badly. It just stops being something you live inside. The apartment feels different now, quieter. Sometimes that quiet feels peaceful. Sometimes it feels like something is missing. Both are true. I've learned a few things. Not the kind you post online with a quote and a soft filter. The kind that sit heavier than that. Pay attention to the small comments. The jokes about your job, your body, your life. They're not always jokes. Sometimes they're the truth dressed up in a way that makes it harder to challenge. Pay attention to how someone presents you to other people. Respect is loud in public, even when love is quiet in private. And most importantly, if someone makes you feel like you're lucky to be chosen instead of valued for who you are, you're already standing in the wrong place. I'm not dating. Not yet. Trust doesn't rebuild on a schedule. But I'm not closed off either. Just more aware, more selective, more unwilling to translate disrespect into something easier to accept. Tonight, I ordered Chinese food. Lo mein. Extra vegetables. I'm sitting on my couch watching a show Landon once called Too Slow to Be Interesting, and realizing he was wrong about that too. The quiet doesn't feel empty tonight. It just feels like mine.